Hello, BookTube. I've got a little mail for you here, but I've got precious little light left. My botched live stream went live, and it went long. But I figure we'll go through a little bit of mail just so that I don't have to stare at these unopened packages until tomorrow. So we've got some periodicals first, and we'll start with one that is really, really disturbing. This is the new issue of Esquire. There's Jake Gyllenhaal on the cover, and it's the typical square-bound lad mag with glossy ads for obscenely expensive watches and whatnot. So you wouldn't think that it would have anything in it that would really bother me, but it did. I want to get to that thing, and then I'll read you why it bothered me, and then we'll proceed to sunnier climes. I should have turned down the page. This is a magazine that I've subscribed to for years, just years. I admit that usually it's because of the peripheral case. Usually I subscribe to it because of fugitive books related stuff, not usually because well, actually, I could just use this thing called the table of contents, couldn't I, to find the thing that I'm looking for. There's one thing in here that shocked me, and I thought in the 21st century that I was not at page 54. Okay, I thought that I was not really shockable, but it worked. I want to read it to you, even though it's a little disturbing. It's a little soiling, but I want to show it to you so that you know why you won't be hearing about Esquire on this channel again. This is a piece by Mitchell S. Jackson called "Now Boarding White People," and I want to read you just the way it starts. It's an eternal traveling hope, the first class upgrade. One I fortuned upon on a flight from New York to Phoenix when a blithe attendant bopped back to my exit row seat, asked my name, and announced that I'd be moving up front. All the way up front, as it turned out, a first row aisle seat, beside a 20-something white guy, across from a white man with a hoary ponytail and a white woman who sported matching flower print masks. Over my shoulder, the rest of the first-class cabin was filled with middle-aged or older white folks and a lone Indian man, AirPods jammed into their ears, a few with a watch that cost as much as a private flight peeking from their sleeve, one with an iPad tuned conspicuously, disturbingly, to a film that featured the gruesome murder of Asians, all of whom looked as though they believed themselves enthroned in their rightful place on the plane, tantamount, one might argue, to their rightful place on earth. What was that the Bible said about what's due to the meek? Stoked as I was to catch an upgrade, I was also experiencing my usual discomfort. Flying in first is a psychological experiment for me, and could not help but feel queries in the hot eyes of my cabin mates. Why are you up here? What do you do for a living? Are you famous? Do you think you deserve what I deserve? Dubiety, that is his word for doubt, that's voiced about as often as it burns tacit. Questions that, as mightily as I resist, underscore the nagging suspicion that I don't belong among the haves, that I am undeserving of extra legroom, hot food, and an attendant asking if I want an extra squeeze of lime in my club soda before wheels up. For far too many, the possibility of an other, and that's with a capital O, enjoying leisure, of them possessing disposable income, of them being equal in any meaningful way to someone who's white, well, all of that is near unfathomable, which is to say, seeing me or anybody in the range of my complexion in first class upsets what white folks work hard to make us believe is the natural order of things. White folks all working together to do that, keep in mind, with secret meetings. Quote, travel is one of the few realms of life where American class system is really laid bare. University of Pennsylvania historian Mia Bay, author of Traveling Black, a new book on the history of and the resistance to travel segregation, told me, quote, I think that's where African Americans get into trouble. I think the message to African Americans is that African Americans cannot be truly first-class people. They can't be on the first tier of Americans in terms of traveling in that elite space. Close quote. Now we're back to the author, who's talking directly to you now. Now, forgive me, dear reader, but does this describe the way you think? Even a little? Really and truly think? And if so, at what point do you investigate that thinking? That is how this piece starts. And it's not surprising anymore. It's disgusting. It's ridiculous and disgusting to see this kind of racism just written openly, no coding at all. But it is still curious to me. It is still confusing to me, because this article had to be approved by an editor at Esquire. And the start of this article, it's not buried on page 5, the start of this article calls all white people who subscribe to Esquire racist. It calls all white people racist. Does that describe the way you think? Even a little? Those stupid ham-handed rhetorical questions are designed to be answered yes, and absolutely cannot be answered no. Even though the author's own description, which I'm sure happened because it torpedoes his own claims, completely denies it, completely contradicts. He is not being stared at by his cabinet mates. He himself describes how they're ignoring him. He's also offered an upgrade. I'm sure that he was surrounded by white people who were not offered that upgrade. But he gets the upgrade, and what do we see? We see him racially profiling. We see him calling all the white people complacent and lordly. We see him criticizing the Asian guy, singling him out for whatever reason. And we see him making all sorts of suppositions about how I noticed that on an iPad, Asians were being killed extravagantly. But when he says, these are questions that are voiced about as often as they burn tacit, that isn't true. No one voices these questions. Only extreme, bitter, dead-end racists think this way. When the writer asked the question, now forgive me, dear reader, but does this describe the way you think? Your answer will be no. You see somebody getting an upgrade to first class, you think, oh, what a lucky duck. You don't think, wait, a black person doesn't belong up there. Utterly ridiculous. It's corrosively racist, just explicitly corrosively racist. You don't think that. I don't think that. No one in the author's own description thinks that way. But we get an article like this that not only says totally unjustly that everyone on that flight was racist without any evidence whatsoever, but that actually calls every white reader of Esquire racist by asking these questions in a way that is clearly meant to be answered only in yes. And although this isn't unusual, like I say, this is the age that we live in. You find this kind of openly expressed racism everywhere from Reddit subthreads all the way to the faculty of Rutgers University. So it's not that it's weird to see it. We see it all the time. What's weird to me is that it got past those editors at Esquire. Since if every white-skinned subscriber to Esquire didn't like being called a racist in an article on page 54 and canceled their subscription, Esquire would go out of business tomorrow. Are they just assuming that isn't going to happen? Maybe that no one's going to read this thing, that they're just buying this magazine for the watch ads? They could very well be right. But I'm not. I'm not buying Esquire for the watch ads, and will never read another issue. I think my subscription probably has the better part of a year to go. But an article vetted and agreed to, greenlit, by Esquire's editorial board just called me racist. To put it in back lot argument type terms, I don't have to stand for that. I don't have to volunteer for that at all. Until I read those ham-handed, stupid, racist rhetorical questions, I had no idea what direction the article was going in. I thought it was going to be a normal Esquire article about how fun it is to get an unexpected upgrade to first class. In other words, even though it's 2022, I was still caught off guard by naked, raw racism just being paraded in front of me. We need to wipe these MFers out. So, just in terms of our mail hauls and our regular traffic in periodicals, you're never going to hear me talk about Esquire again. I'm not going to mention the next issue because I'm not going to read another word. The only thing that would rectify it would be an apology. And no one in the 21st century apologizes for anything under any circumstances whatsoever for any reason imaginable. It simply does not happen. A whole generation of kids is being raised who will need to Google what an apology even was. It's not that they themselves are as intractable as the incompetents who are raising them. It's that they have never heard the word. They have no idea what it means. They have no idea that it was even ever a social thing you could do to retract something offensive that you had said, to regret it and retract it, which is what an apology is. That will never happen. Esquire will never do that. I'd be willing to bet they'll never even get a negative response. They'll never even get a letter saying, hey, that was a really gross thing that you ran. So since an apology is off the table, I will just have to drop them, which is a shame because I've really enjoyed them over the years. I've been writing about Esquire for a long time. Who knows how many people I've actually driven to subscribe because I liked their magazine. So it's a little bit of a shame. I will subscribe to something else in hopes that it's not explicitly racist, and maybe that will do. But the other two periodicals were a lot better. We have the Vineyard Gazette, for instance, which is the broadsheet newspaper that comes out on Martha's Vineyard, the island off the coast of Massachusetts, with lavish birding news in the back. Always original photographs. It's people on the vineyard, avid birders, most of them, taking advantage of the great bird traffic on the island. And also we have the Bedford Times Press from Bedford, Iowa. This is a small town Iowa newspaper in Taylor County that I get a subscription to because I write for them. Now, most of the thing is going to be the local Utes. The local Utes are on all of the various sports teams. But if you open the front page of this admittedly local newspaper, you get my books column. They give me a very generous space for a books column every week in the Bedford Times Press and the Lennox Timetable. Every week, my Ex Libris column appears. How does this one start? I recently encountered a small mountain of boxes filled with books, a wide array of miscellaneous books in a variety of physical shapes and sizes and conditions. Several of them have obviously spent a great deal of time in boxes, in basements, in attics, or the like. Exactly the kind of motley arrangement that openly invites rooting around and pulling each book into sunlight for at least a moment or two. You find a spot to sit, you steel yourself for some stooping and hefting, you clear off some flat surfaces all around you, and then you begin digging. I've done it countless times, and in the aforementioned basements and attics, and the thrill never lessens. And then I talk about those books. Wonderful to be writing a column again for a small paper in Iowa. Wonderful. And for a small figure, you could subscribe to the Bedford Times Press. I admit, you won't get anything out of the paper the rest of the time. If you're not in Iowa, if you're not in Taylor County, you won't get anything out of the rest of the paper. But you'll get my column every week. But then we have mail. Then we have a couple of packages before we're going to run out of light completely. So what is this first one? First one is a finished copy of something. I'll make sure we don't have any. Oh, fantastic. Okay, great. We've already seen this on this channel. This is the finished copy of Young Mungo, the new novel by Douglas Stewart, the author of Shuggie Bain. This is the ultimate everyone watching for the sophomore book example, because Shuggie Bain took the whole critical world by storm. Everyone wrote about it. Everyone loved it. And this is the next book. This is the next book by the same author. So, does the author succumb to the notorious sophomore slump? Time will tell what the critical... Oh, wow, look at that. Oh, the end papers are full color. Depressing, Glaswegian, but still full color. How lovely. Is that going to be true on the back as well? Yeah, same picture on the back. Great. Fantastic. So what do we have here? Douglas Stewart's... Okay, let's see. I don't want to hear about Shuggie Bain. We're running out of light. Growing up in the housing estate in Glasgow. Oh, that must be the housing estate that we're seeing right there. Mungo and James are born under different stars. Mungo a Protestant and James a Catholic. And they should be sworn enemies if they're to be seen as men at all. Yet against all odds, they become best friends as they find a sanctuary in the pigeon dovecote that James has built for his prize racing birds. As they fall in love, they dream of finding somewhere they belong, while Mungo works hard to hide his true self from all those around him, especially his big brother Hamish, a local gang leader with a brutal reputation to uphold. And when, several months later, Mungo's mother sends him on a fishing trip to a loch in western Scotland with two strange men whose drunken banter belies murky pass, he will need to summon all his inner strength and courage to try to get back to the place of safety, a place where he and James might still have a future. Okay, there's a tiny mistake here. With two strange men whose drunken banter belies murky past. That is not actually the word that the writer of this Dust Jacket copy wants. Their drunken men and their weird, strange conversation does not belie their murky past. It betokens it. Belie means that it's showing you something different from what reality is, from the reality you'd expect, right? The sheer girth of the man behind the deli counter belied his gracefulness on his feet. That sort of thing, where there's a contradiction. Here, the murky past of these weird men is betokened by their banter. It's not belied by it. but that's a very small hair-splitting point. Uh, uh, Great. Okay, so Young Mungo. This comes out, I think, in, oh God, I ought to know this. I think this comes out in April. Uh, I don't think it's a March release, but all of you who have read Sugarbane, if you haven't read Sugarbane, you've just heard all of the hype about it. It fully warrants the hype. It's a beautiful book. And this could very well be. I would know already, but I have been grappling with Mussolini. So I have not been grappling with Young Mungo. But then we'll do this last package before we run out of light completely. What have we got here? Invoice. I did invoice. Oh, okay, great. I think we saw this already. This is Evergreen by John Reed and Thomas Lovejoy, Saving Big Forests to Save the Planet. Very nice cover. Evergreen. Very nice. So what have we got here? Did we see this already? I don't remember. This is from the good folks at W.W. Norton. Covered in blurbs. Comes out in March. March release. We probably saw this already. And it showcases the importance and wonder of those ancient forests, 5 of which remain on Earth, but are endangered by land development, unsustained resource extraction, road building, and a cycle of forest fires intensified by climate change. So the authors go to each one of the major gigantic forests left on Earth, the lungs of the planet, the things that generate oxygen for this planet. They go to each one of those and look at all that's going on. The threats to it, the biodiversity inside it, the people who are protecting it, the people who are trying to destroy it. Probably a book I'm going to wish were longer. But this comes out at the end of March, March 29th. So I still have time to get to this. I won't get to this right away. I'm still dealing with early March. But there you go. So we have fiction and nonfiction for the mail. We have Evergreen and Young Mungo in 2 finished copies. Plus a ton of periodicals. We have the Bedford Times Press. You too can get Ex Libris by me, by yours truly, my bookish meditations every week. The Vineyard Gazette, which is another local newspaper, although it has a little bit more generalities to it than the Bedford Times Press. And Esquire, Racist magazine that has lost a reader, unfortunately. Hate to think it, but I'll find something else. I'm sure that History Today probably hasn't fallen under the sway of this kind of noxious nonsense. So maybe I'll subscribe to them with the money I'll be saving from this. But anyway, that is a quick, abbreviated mail haul because we're out of time. We're out of light, thanks to my live stream. But I really have to thank you all of you who showed up at that live stream, because I went in furious that I couldn't get it to work, and you all calmed me down. So that was really, really nice. It just goes to show what I've been saying for 5 years now. This is the strangest parasocial relationship anywhere on YouTube. I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm going to wrap this up for now, though, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.